because we're going for a clean separation of code, semantic code from presentational code, I noticed that in our form, when you start looking at these input elements, you'll see that they have actually a size value over there, and that's size 40, and that's defining how many characters wide it's going to be. And actually, if we go down to the text field area, it also has rows. It has columns and rows to define how big it is. Well, honestly, we don't want that piece of code in our HTML because that's something we could easily define in our CSS. And plus, if you look, if we wanted 40 character value like it is over here, why would we want to put it for each one of these when we could just set an input element for rather a CSS call that targets the input element and do it all in one go? So the first thing I really need to do here is delete the size value from all of these different input methods. Now let's see, let's go right through to all of them. And then of course for the text area, which is a little bit different, you want to erase the rows and the columns. Once we save that, we'll just take a quick peek at what it turned out to look like. Alright. There we go. So now we definitely want to stretch this out. So let's go ahead and make a CSS declaration in our style sheet for what we're gonna put is make sure that our input, and then we're gonna do we'll do let's see, input and text area. I'm not sure if compound is gonna work. Okay, it did work. And oh shoot, it embedded it instead of well, let me just go ahead and get that out of here. You know, that's what I get. Sometimes I get more mixed up going through the menus and just doing it straight through the code. So I'll do it in here. Alright, input, space, and then text area. And then I'm going to define a width for these, which will do 40 EMs. That's 40 characters wide. And now let's see. Oh cool, it did it, but it also messed up our send button over here because our send is an input element, right? When you look at the send button down there, it's definitely an input. Its type is submit, which makes it a button. But so here's what I think we need to do. Fortunately, we have field set defined. We have the submit button in its own field set, which is its own, and has its own class defined. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to define a new class for the field set above so it doesn't affect this guy down here. So going to the CSS, why don't I put here's what I'll do. Since I'm gonna apply this style to the field set so it affects all those elements, what I need to do is do field set dot, I'm going to name it contact. That's what I'm going to apply. Contact is going to be what I apply to the field set above. And then I'll put input because I want that input element to get affected. And then I'll copy that and text area. Okay, and then I'll do the width. I'll do the width at 40 EMs, and then close it. Make sure I delete that other stuff down there. And let's see how that turns out for me. All right, good. Oh, of course it's not going to work because what didn't I do here? Think about it. Yep, you're right. You were thinking I didn't give my field set a class. And that class is the contact that I just created. So don't forget to add that to the field set that you just created in your CSS. Now if I refresh it, there we go. Now what you may find annoying is the fact that the text area is always like slightly different size than that because it's different size than the input element. What we could do is actually, in order to get this to be closer to that, what I'm going to do is go back to my CSS and actually separate one from the other. So I'm going to take out this contact, the field set dot contact space text area, and put it in its own declaration. And I've played with this before, so I know that if I give it a width that's about, if I'm using EMs, if I give it about a quarter more, it'll straighten it out. It's not, oh, it's pretty close. Yeah, I think it's actually exactly close. I mean, I could test it out if I used measure it, and I could just kind of put it next to each other. It looks pretty, let's see. Yeah, that definitely aligns nicely. Okay, so a quarter helped out. So far so good. Let's actually see. Well, you know what? We took out the rows and columns for text area, so we probably want to define a height for this thing too. So for the text area, I'm going to give it a height of, I don't know, let's say 20 EMs, and that's going to extend it a bit. That looks good to me. Now, the final touch, of course, is just to make sure we preview this in our 3 main browsers. And, well, here it is in Internet Explorer. We have this mysterious scroll bar here, and I'm probably going to be getting rid of that in a second. But before I bother with that, let me see what this thing looks like in Safari. Looks good in Safari. This stretchy thing, the stretchy part of Safari, you know, I haven't done much research on how to get rid of that, although I've talked to a lot of people and they seem to like it. So I'm not going to bother with it. I'm actually just going to leave it alone. But I do want to get rid of this over here from Internet Explorer. How do I do that? Well, I mean, if you're stuck at this stage and you're still starting off with CSS, you probably don't know right off the bat how to do it. So what are you going to do? Well, why don't you just Google hide scroll bar in text area and then throw CSS back there, so it gives you a CSS way of doing it. How to hide a text area scroll bar. Let's see. Should have some piece of code over here that it says overflow hidden. Look, that's a hint. That looks like something. Now, do we know this is going to work? No. Actually, this is exactly the code that's going to work. But, you know, you see something like this, why don't you just give it a shot? Just take that and pop it into your CSS. Let's see. I'll pop it into the text area, overflow hidden, save it. Let's see what that looks like in Internet Explorer. Perfect. Got rid of it. So now what do we do here? Just to kind of do an overview of everything we did, we took out from the source code the size value that was in one of these input fields. All of them came with size equals and it had some value. So first we took that out. Then we explicitly defined a width through CSS. We did it in EMs, which was similar to what it was because the size equals 40 is 40 characters, and that's about, I don't know if the size was exactly the same, but for our purposes it's fine. Second thing the next thing we did, not the third thing we did is we set the field set a class because we had a submit. Remember, we had a our submit button is sitting in or send button. It's sitting in its own field set, and it has a different class called submit. So we actually defined a class for the other field set, which was just contact, and that way, when we set a width for our input and text area elements, it didn't affect another input element, the send button. We had to separate the two, the input and the text area, because you know there's slight variations in the width because of this invisible scroll bar that we got rid of. And the last thing we did is we actually just hid the scroll bar from Internet Explorer with the autoflow hidden value. Pretty easy, and definitely doing it this way makes controlling the whole form a lot easier than leaving that size equals attribute inside of the input element.